Welcome, this is Najma Minhas with Global Village Space. I'm joined today by Pakistan's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ambassador Moeed Akram. Ambassador Sahab, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure, Najma. Nice speaking to you.
Ambassador Sahab, I'd like to start off by saying, as you know, this August, Pakistan turns 74. You yourself have had over 50 years of experience in the Foreign Service. I'd like to turn to an article you wrote for us beginning of this year, January 2021, where you talked about Pakistan's foreign policy challenges and opportunities. And you refer to the fact that Pakistan's current major external challenges included Kashmir, Indian hostility, Afghanistan terrorism, and economic vulnerability. And these are all largely products of history. Are you saying that history is responsible for this and we don't need to take any personal responsibility as a nation?
No, of course we do. Obviously policies are made and policies are responsible for history. So when I say history is responsible, it's the context of history, how we evolved our policies. We were born into a security environment that required us to find an equalizer to a larger adversary, and that led us into an alliance system which was not totally compatible with our national priorities, and therefore we were led into several situations that in the latter part of our history proved to be counter to the Cold War, alliance with the West. From that alliance, in particular, the breakup of Pakistan in 1971. Apart from the mistakes we made ourselves, of course, right. But the Soviet-Indian alignment was largely responsible for. Therefore, one can go through the various events of history of where we gained from the alignment and where we lost from the alignments that we had. The one good thing we did was our early establishment of a close relationship with the People's Republic of China.
Okay.
And at that stage, of course, China was an emerging, developing country. It was poorer than Pakistan. It was a large country. But we saw the geopolitical rationale for that relationship, and we established that relationship, and I think that has stood us in good stead through all the travails that we went through with the early alignment with the US, the breakup of that alliance post 62, the re-emergence of that alliance then when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan,
right.
The breakup again with the Pressler sanctions, and then re-emergence after 9/11 with the war on terrorism. Now, all of those had short-term advantages for us, but long-term consequences for Pakistan. And therefore, I think the lesson to be learned is to be careful in making strategic policy choices.
Right.
And I think that is a lesson we need to bear in mind as we face the challenges that we are facing today.
Right. So before we go to today's challenges, I'd like to take you back to one of the alignments that you're referring to. In the 1950s, when Prime Minister of Pakistan, Liaquat Ali Khan, decided to go to the United States for his meeting, instead of taking up the meeting offered to him by the Soviet Union, do you think ultimately, now looking back in hindsight, that was a crucial strategic mistake that Pakistan made of aligning itself with the Western Bloc rather than the Soviet Union at that time, or even to have stayed neutral the way India did during the whole period where it called itself non-aligned?
Yes, two things. Firstly, alignments do not emerge out of one meeting or even two meetings. They are a process in which calculations are made by the establishments of or governments of countries. So I think our alignment was not the result of one meeting or non-meeting as such. Secondly, we have to remember that at that stage, we were looking to equalize the power of India as a larger country, and we were seeking a alignment or a support, a patron, if you will, which could equalize India's power.
Right.
And led us into the conclusion the offer came from the West of that alignment. And because we had this compulsion, we accepted that offer. Now, whether we should have moderated our behavior as an ally, that is something that we could have controlled perhaps better. But the alignment itself, I think, made sense for Pakistan at that time. It's a question of how you manage a relationship that becomes important.
So you refer to the need for equalizers for India. At one point in your article that you wrote, you mentioned that historical analysis will reveal the major and minor strategic tactical mistakes which allowed us to overcome these challenges and had many missed opportunities to overcome these challenges. Do you think there were ever one and for all kind of opportunity that we missed with India during the early period in our history, first 50 years maybe?
Yes, certainly. I think first of all, the opportunity which we had in the 1962 Indo-China War, when we had the opportunity to take Kashmir, India was fully preoccupied with the war with China, and any tactical, if we were tactically and strategically bold at that time, we would have gone in and taken Kashmir instead of trying to take it in 1965.
Right. But if we had taken it in 1962, are you saying then our issues with India would have finished once and for all after we took Kashmir?
No, of course not. Kashmir, as I have always held, Kashmir is only a symptom of the ingrained hostility between the two nations which emerged in 1947. India has always been a Hindu nation, whether it called itself that or not. And we would continue to have an adversarial relationship. But if we had been able to take Kashmir, we would be in a much better position to negotiate for self-determination for Kashmir at that time. So that was, I think, a historical mistake. We were not bold enough to take that. We came under pressure from our ally, which was the United States, not to do it. But, this is a question of managing a relationship. We could have said, no, this is a national priority. We could have gone and taken it. So I think there were mistakes of that nature. The other big mistake, obviously, was in Afghanistan when we supported the extremists against the Soviet Union. Again, it was an ideologically driven motivation at that time. We didn't calculate the consequences, the blowback from supporting those extremists. We are still living with those consequences of that mistake. Then again, when we joined the war on terror, again, we made a similar mistake of not being open about the fact that we could not support the overthrow of the Taliban government at that time. We could support action against Al-Qaeda, but not against overthrow established government in Kabul. And we switched alliances 180 degrees at the drop of a hat. And I think we should have been much more clearer of what we could do with the Americans against terrorism and what we could not do with the Americans. And I think that that lack of clarity has brought us to a path where the war on terror has cost us so greatly in terms of lives, in terms of the extremist movements that were born in Pakistan, turned on Pakistan, the Kashmiri liberation movements, which then turned on Pakistan at that time. So we paid a heavy cost for that mistake. So those are mistakes that we are living with at this time. So history, as I said, our problems are the consequences of history, but history is written by men and policies.
Do you think, though, there have been opportunities we've missed with India, though? Because the reason why we've needed these equalizers, and to some extent the reason maybe we've made these strategic mistakes, is because of that need for an equalizer. Have there been missed opportunities with India, which maybe should have been availed in the past 74 years, which would have meant that we could have made better long-term decisions and we would have had forever peace with India as a result of our availing this opportunity? Do you think those kind of opportunities have existed with vis-a-vis India?
Well, peace comes through strength. Mm-hmm. Peace with an adversary is negotiated when you have equalized power.
Right.
If you are weaker, then you have to accept an unjust and unequal outcome. Mm-hmm. Pakistan has not been willing to accept an unequal outcome, but at the same time, Pakistan has not had the equal strength to negotiate an equal peace with India. Right. That is the central problem we have faced with India. So if we are not willing to accept an unequal peace, we have to equalize power before we can achieve a just peace. And that equalization of power in the context of Kashmir, at least, comes from the freedom struggle of the Kashmiri people. Since we do not have the conventional military capability to fight and defeat India, mm-hmm. Therefore, the equalizer in this case is the freedom struggle of the Kashmiri people. And that is where India has tried to hold back our hand and has prevented us from supporting the Kashmiri people and their freedom struggle through this device of portraying that struggle as a struggle of terrorism rather than a struggle for liberation.
Do you think?
So I don't see that we have missed opportunities with India. Mm. There have been many talks, many discussions, but the essential equation is what counts, and that equation has been unequal against us, and we have not been able to equalize that either externally through conventional power or internally in Kashmir through the freedom struggle.
So from what you're saying, it seems to me there's a whole narrative out there, especially amongst India, which says that if the Kashmir issue had been resolved, which they believe to some extent they resolved it in 1971, had that issue been resolved, then India and Pakistan today would not stand the way they're standing with these tensions and bad relations, basically. Do you agree with that India and Pakistan would have had a totally different relationship if the Kashmir issue is resolved once and for all? The way the Kashmir
what do they mean by what do the Indians mean by resolving the Kashmir issue? Mm-hmm. What they mean is Pakistan should accept the unjust status quo. They have occupied 2/3 of Kashmir. They want us to accept it, to forget about the rights of the Kashmiris. And if we do that, and if we accept the collateral conclusion, which is Indian dominance of the region, then we will have a good relationship. We will have trade, and we will be another Bangladesh. And, you know, everybody would be happy except for the Kashmiris. And perhaps those people in Pakistan who support the Kashmiris. So it's the critical choice for us is, can we accept an unjust solution for Kashmir? And if we do that, and if we accept Indian hegemony in the region, yes, relations can be normalized. But if we want relations to be normalized with a just solution for Kashmir, then we have to struggle for it. And it involves tensions, it involves confrontation, it involves confrontational diplomacy, adversarial relationship, the whole gamut of the military equation between India and Pakistan. So it's a simple choice, but it's a critical choice for Pakistan. And I think that people of Pakistan are not prepared to accept an unequal solution for Kashmir.
But people of Pakistan do want a working relationship with India, right? And it seems as if from what you're saying, that India is just not interested. It wants an unequal relationship, a relationship on its own demands. What does Pakistan need to do then if it wants to have a reasonably working relationship where, for example, India does not lobby in FATF for Pakistan to remain in the grey list?
Well, so long as India considers Pakistan an adversary, it will lobby against us every opportunity they get. This is no surprise. Every opportunity, every avenue in which they can put pressure on Pakistan, constrain our capabilities, military, diplomatic, etc., they will try to do so. And we have to be ready to respond to the Indian actions. Now, what can we do about it? I think we have to find ways to equalize the power relationship. And there are ways to do it. And that equalization process could happen. I think it has happened to some extent last year when China confronted the Indians on the border in Ladakh and obliged the Indians to move 100,000 troops from other places, including the line of control, to the northern border with China. I think that diminished India's capability to attack Pakistan, and that has diminished, or at least equalized somewhat, the equation. And the overtures that we've had from India with regard to possible normalization of relations and a dialogue is a direct consequence of the change in the strategic calculations of India once the front with China was opened. This is just one element of the equation, but the equation, if it is changed, if it is equalized, we have the opportunity to at least get some semblance of justice for the Kashmiris.
What is the equalization that you're referring to? Because when you've referred throughout the last 15, 20 minutes on this equalization with India. What is this equalization you refer to? Because obviously they're 8 times bigger in terms of population. They've got trillions of dollars more in terms of a GDP economy. Their army is much bigger, is much more financed and oiled. What is the equalization you're referring to? Because people find that very odd. I mean, Pakistan aspiring to be equal to India.
No, we cannot be equal to India, but the strategic geopolitical situation can evolve in ways that their capacity to conduct aggression against Pakistan is diminished. And that has already happened to some extent. They you've seen General Rawat's talks about the two-front war.
Right.
They could face a 2.5-front war with China on the one hand, Pakistan, and an internal insurgency in Kashmir as such. That would be an equalizer. And I don't think that the Indians are prepared for a two-front war. And that is why the overtures are being made to Pakistan, or have been made to Pakistan. Of course, the Modi government is ideologically committed to its policy in Kashmir. It will be very difficult for Modi and company to reverse their policy in Kashmir. But the only reason they would do it is because they see that they are facing a larger adversary on the northern front, and therefore need to ease tensions on the western front in order to face the larger adversary. So this is the geopolitical equations that I'm talking about, and those equations can change over time, and we have to see what the equations are and negotiate accordingly, in accordance with what are the strengths and weaknesses at any given moment.
So in terms of China, what is the equation that Pakistan has with China? I mean, apart from, is China now our new equalizer with India? Is that how we perceive China? What are the synergies in this relationship which will hold for the long term?
China has always been our equalizer with India. I think Indian aggression would have happened several times against us before we acquired nuclear weapons. That Indian aggression could have happened several times. Even in 1965, when we were fighting the Indians, at that time, China moved troops on the north in order to ensure that the Indian divisions in the north were not moved against us. So that was part of the equalizer as such. 1971, we asked the Chinese for help, and the Chinese were ready to help us in 1971 in the Bangladesh theater.
Okay.
I think if you read Kissinger's books, you will see the discussions that took place in New York at that time between Mr. Bhutto and Mr. Kissinger and the Chinese deputy foreign minister. So China has been an equalizer for many years for us, much more than the United States. Especially after 1965, it's been the Chinese equation that has halted aggression against Pakistan. Of course, after we acquired nuclear weapons, it became a different ball game altogether.
Right. But what is the synergy we have with China as a relationship in itself rather than as an equalizer with India? How are we going to grow this particular relationship?
No, I think that the relationship with China can be huge. It's unlimited. It's up to us how we grow that relationship. As far as China is concerned, let me record to you something that Mao Zedong told his second ambassador when he was being posted to Pakistan, and this has been reported. He said to him, "Look after Pakistan. It is our window to the West."
Right.
And look, this was Mao Zedong in the late 50s with a vision of Pakistan's role. And then if you see today your CPEC, what is it? This is China's window to, if not the entire West, it's China's window to West Asia, to South Asia, to the Arabian Sea, to Africa. So there is a convergence, a geopolitical convergence of interests between Pakistan and China. And geography doesn't change. China has a built-in adversarial relationship with India. Pakistan has a built-in adversarial relationship with India. There is a convergence of geopolitical interests between the two countries. This is now multiplied by China's determination to build out into the world a new model of economic cooperation and political influence, which is the Belt and Road Initiative. Our interests, our geography, our economics all converge at this time. And therefore, there is unlimited scope for development of our relationship. We go looking around for investment from the West, we will not receive it very easily. The West has now a vision which includes India as its primary ally in the region.
Right.
China regards Pakistan as a primary ally also in the region. So I think our future, what we should be prioritizing at the moment, is to see how to maximize our convergences with China, how to maximize the economic contribution from China to Pakistan's development. This can be a rapid development. And China has invested $25 billion in Pakistan in the last 4 years. The United States did not invest even half of that in the last 50 years. So one has to work on the basis of realities on the ground. No matter, we speak English, so we find it easy to deal with the West. But the geopolitical reality is that our future is linked with China. And
we're still talking about geopolitics, which is, you have 50 years of experience, and your energy and your time was spent during that period of time when everyone talked about geopolitics. But the new coin word everyone in Islamabad is using is geoeconomics. So do you think that's time? How does that change our foreign policy in some ways, apart from China and the CPEC part of it? Should we be looking more at the economy part of it, and maybe that would drive our politics, our foreign policy in a very different way?
I don't think that is necessarily the case. Our geoeconomic concept is based on geopolitics.
Right.
If we are looking for connectivity, what are we looking for? Connectivity with China, with Central Asia, with West Asia, and if things normalize with India, with South Asia. But that connectivity is made possible by geopolitics, by our geographical situation and the political environment in which we operate. If China was not interested in the Belt and Road, if China was not interested in pushing the CPEC, if the Central Asian countries were not interested in breaking through the barrier of Russian control over their communications, they would not be looking for the southern route through Afghanistan and Pakistan to the Arabian Sea. So geoeconomics is dictated by geopolitics. And I think that we should not confuse ourselves. Geoeconomics obviously is what we are looking for as a priority. I think what we mean is that we are driven at this moment by the need to develop our country, to pursue economic and social development in our country, and we will utilize our geopolitical location to promote our economic objectives. I think that's the meaning of what the phrase of geoeconomics that we are using.
What is your understanding of the fact that President Biden hasn't called Prime Minister Imran Khan for the past 8 months? And we've gone from, and throughout Pakistan, people share pictures of President Ayub Khan and a time and an era in Pakistan's history when President Kennedy would come and receive him from the airport. And we've gone from that time to now, where Joe Biden hasn't bothered to pick up the phone to Pakistan. Is this a reflection of bad policies on behalf of Pakistan, on part of Pakistan? Is it to do with that, or is there something else in play?
Well, it's geopolitics. It's strategic changes. When Ayub Khan was received, we were the most allied ally of the United States. We are not. The United States' new ally is India.
Right.
we are considered at best a frenemy, and at worst, an adversary. So why should we expect Biden to call us? Or why should we fall over our feet to call Biden? I think that we should have a certain amount of self-respect for our own sovereignty, our own dignity. If the United States is now allied with India, let's accept the fact and work from there. We obviously do not want a bad relationship with the United States. The United States anger, if you will, is born out of its failure in Afghanistan. It is a completely irrational and emotional assessment of the situation, which provided as an explanation for the military failure and for the strategic mistakes that the United States has made in Afghanistan. Let us accept that and work from there. And we would like to have good relations with the United States. There are areas in which we can cooperate. The American investment, American technology, trade, these are not incompatible with our relationship with China, and China has never asked us to have bad relations with the United States. We are free to explore to the maximum a good relationship with the United States. But if the United States does not want,
but how do you see it going forward, given the fact that what's going to happen, the chaos seems to have started already in Afghanistan, and most Afghan experts predict much more? How do you think this is going to impact the United States and Pakistan's relationship?
Well, the United States is basically left. It's exiting physically from Afghanistan. The big question, of course, all the assessments of civil war and so on and so forth. If the Afghans are left to themselves, they will find a solution. They always have
Right.
over history. If they're left to themselves, they will find a solution, perhaps a decentralized government in Kabul, the representation of all the ethnic compositions in a power structure, which is loose and not impositions in the various districts. They can find a solution. Mm-hmm. But my question is the United States and the West, are they interested in a solution? Do they want a settlement? Why is this story about a civil war, inevitable civil war happening? They have promised continued military support to the Kabul government, to the Afghan National Forces. They are still conducting aerial strikes against the Taliban after having signed an agreement last February with them. They have not kept that agreement. I mean, this is my assessment. Obviously, Pakistan's official policy has not said so. But if you look, they promised the return of prisoners. They promised the delisting of the Taliban from the terrorism list. They promised to withdraw by, I think it was May 1 or something. Mm-hmm. And each one of those elements of that agreement were not observed. The Taliban, on the other hand, promised not to strike at the US and NATO forces while they were withdrawing. They haven't done so. Not one casualty among the US and NATO forces while they have been in the process of withdrawal. So I think the question of who's got the good faith and who's acted in bad faith is an open question at this time. I think if the Afghans are left alone, they will find a solution. But the question is, will they be left alone?
Ambassador, your last few words on just what are the key opportunities that Pakistan at this point should focus on?
Well, as I said, I think the first opportunity is our relationship with China. I think we have to maximize it. I'm glad that Foreign Minister Qureshi is in China for a our strategic dialogue. You've seen the joint communique that's been issued. It's a good. I think that's a good direction. That's our first and should be our first priority. I think in consolidating that relationship, in ensuring that the kind of attacks that happened against the Chinese engineers do not happen again. We have to protect them. There is a campaign by our adversary against the CPAC, against the Chinese involvement, and we have to ensure their security and promote that relationship at all levels: strategic, economic, defense, etc., etc. That's our first priority, I think. Secondly, I think we have to focus on our internal issues, which is ending the terrorism from Afghanistan. The TTP and the Baluch insurgents, we have to put an end to the actions from Afghanistan. And I think that whatever agreement is evolved in Afghanistan, whether the negotiation is with the Taliban, or whether the negotiations is with a broader set of players who emerge in Kabul, our major condition has to be that the safe havens that have been provided to the TTP and to the Baluch insurgent movements, those have to be eliminated. Those have to end in order to provide Pakistan the stability which it needs internally in order to focus on economic and social development. I think those are two major problems.
Ambassador Saab, thank you so much for your time today, and inshallah I look forward to speaking to you again.